America. Now, moving our focus to Syria, where an ongoing multi-sided armed conflict has killed hundreds in the recent days. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights War Monitoring had said that the 19 people, including 4 children, were killed after airstrikes in eastern Ghouta. Hundreds of civilians have been killed in the besieged enclave of Satellite Town and rural areas on the outskirts of Damascus in one of the fiercest bombing campaigns in this 7-year-old civil war. Meanwhile, Russian military has offered Syrian rebels a safe passage out of eastern Ghouta. A proposal was sent to let the insurgents surrender their last stronghold near Damascus. The President Bashar al-Assad and Russia has said rebels could leave with their families and personal weapons through a secure corridor out of eastern Ghouta, where Moscow-backed government forces have made rapid gains in a fierce assault. At another front, Kurdish allied Syrian Arab militias are redeploying 1,700 fighters from fronts against Islamic State to Afrin region to help and fend off a Turkish offensive. The militias have been fighting eastern Syria as part of the US-backed Syrian Democratic Forces. Pentagon has asked and stated that Turkey's offensive against US-backed forces in Syria has affected the fight against Islamic State and led to an operation pause in east. Turkey launched its air and ground assault on Afrin in January to drive out the Syrian Kurdish YPG militia, which it sees as terrorists with links to Kurdish insurgents at home. I am joined by my colleague Daniele Pagani from Jordan. Daniele, the ISIS is gone, but the war continues.
The ISIS is gone is perhaps too early to say. You just stated that 1,700 Kurdish fighters have abandoned their positions in eastern Syria in order to reach their brother in arms fighting against Turkey in the northwestern part of Syria. In the eastern part of Syria, where they were, the battle against ISIS is not over. There are weekly airstrikes conducted by the US-led coalition, and also media reports speak about 170 Kurdish fighters who died in the last 6 weeks fighting against the Islamic State. Remember that the Islamic State is not defeated at all. It is impossible to drive completely out such a terrorist organization. They simply went underground, meaning that they are changing their strategy, ambushing checkpoints and attacking convoys traveling from one town to the other. So these 1,700 fighters who abandoned the front line in eastern Syria to reach Afrin are perhaps one of the best opportunities that the Islamic State has had since the fall of Raqqa and Mosul, their 2 most important cities in West Asia.
But then, of late, there is conflict of interest when it comes to Syria, when it comes to Turkey, when it comes to the militias. In your opinion and the ground reporting, what do you think that the future events are likely to be in Syria in context of the eastern corridor, which is still very, very active?
The problem here is that victory was proclaimed too early and troops started pulling out from certain areas too early. Now we have a very problematic situation in Syria, where we have the Islamic State regrouping on the border with Iraq and less fighters are ready to confront them since the Kurds moved into Afrin. Then we have the Afrin front line, which is a new war in Syria that Turkey is combating against an organization, the SDF, the Syrian Democratic Forces, which they consider terrorists. They consider them linked to the Kurdish insurgency within their borders. So if you ask me what is the solution as of now, I would say that the first step would be to convince all actors on the ground to respect the United Nations Security Council ceasefire, to give relief to the civilian population in all areas, and then to start discussing while the ceasefire is going on. But this is clearly not happening because all belligerents on the ground believe to have the right to continue their offensive. So on the short term, the ceasefire is a dire necessity. On the long run, a credible peace process is also a necessity. But it needs actors on the ground to lay down their weapons.
Thank you, Daniele. Thank you for this update. My colleague Daniele Pagani from Jordan.